That's available. I don't see him. 96. I don't see him. It's for that. It was the last guy. Alex is on it.
Yeah, I know, but I'm gonna give it to Linda for
Many people say that they want to write a book, yet 9 out of every 10 people who start writing a book never finish it, leaving one of their biggest dreams unfulfilled. So, what is it about the 1 in 10 people who do finish writing their book? What do they have, and what drives them to complete their books, their plays, and their songs? Welcome to the Editor's Desk, where we explore their writing experiences, their motivations, and their struggles. And now, here are your hosts, author, writing coach, and self-publishing guide, Lynn Everard, and author, Louise Gomez. Welcome to the Editor's Desk. I'm Lynn Everard.
Hi everybody, Louise Gomez here. Welcome, we're excited to have you here.
So, when I was growing up north, school didn't start for kids until the day after Labor Day. And when it started getting really hot in August, we used to refer to it as the dog days of summer. So, if you're stuck in the dog days of summer, and I know here in Palm Beach County where we are, I believe kids go back to school next week.
I have started seeing the school buses already, so
yes,
I know
so
they're
maybe
back
sooner.
to school.
And,
yeah.
But if you're looking for a great book to read, a metaphysical, medical romance novel,
definitely.
we have the man who wrote it with us tonight.
Yes.
And you're going to want to stay tuned and find out what this is all about.
Definitely. And it's funny you mentioned that because I have memories. When you said that, I had memories of when I was a kid reading a book. Like back in the day, it was like Jackie Collins. Let's sneak out the Jackie Collins. And I remember a friend of mine, we would switch. She'd read a chapter, I'd read a chapter. We were like sunbathing, you know, with like the baby oil and the iodine and just like reading. But it has always been something that I've done, is read during the summer. So it's so funny you say that, dog days of summer, because it's like, why not pick up a good novel and pick up a good book? And it's so funny because when I saw this book, when you handed it to me, Under the Divi Tree, I immediately knew it was about Aruba. I've been to Aruba twice, and I was like, oh, I have some really good memories of Aruba. So I was super excited to read this book. And yeah, we're going to introduce Michael Solomon in a minute. We have some great questions for him, but how about I read his...
Well, before we do that, let's introduce a new segment that we're starting.
Okay.
Beginning of the show, we find that we learn something from every guest who comes on.
True.
And what did we learn last week from Noah Crane?
I would say my takeaway was collaboration. I just felt a genuine desire to collaborate, and it was mutual because that was all that she was about too. When we left, we were like, how can we continue this, right? We interviewed her last week, and it was so beautiful because she wanted it to kind of collaborate, and we did. It was amazing, actually.
Yeah, and that's my takeaway as well. So let's introduce Michael.
So Michael wrote Under the Divi Tree, True Love Needs No Reason, and I just want to read his bio real quick. Michael Solomon is a former NYPD detective. He was assigned to the Organized Crime Control Bureau and the Intelligence Division. After his police career, he founded his own business. In 2002, he retired and started writing. He is the recipient of the 2017 John E. Weaver Reader's Choice Award, the 2016 Next Generation Indie Book Award, and Books and Authors 2016 winner as the Best New Fiction Writer. Wow, you got a lot of good stuff. Both of his novels have been written for the Hollywood screen. So Michael, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here. It's my pleasure.
You know, if I could just say really quickly, I was kind of taken away because when I saw like NYPD detective, now I'm from New York, born and raised in Queens. I think you're familiar with Queens from what I'm gathering, because you wrote a lot of stuff here about Brooklyn, Bronx, maybe Queens too, yeah. So I was like, wow. Normally in my mind, you know, I box people in. I'm like, I can't believe like a former NYPD wrote such like this novel, which was so beautifully written. I just never would have imagined that. So please tell us, how did this come about?
Thank you. It was just, you know, something I picked up, and I had a couple of ideas about it. But it actually started with something that I did about 20 years, a little over 20 years ago, where I actually took a trip to Paris and learned to speak French as a surprise at the time. And I said, you know, it would make a great love story, but at the same time, it's got to have some suspense. So I threw in the sleep disorder based on the third eye principle.
Yeah.
And I did research. As a matter of fact, it's funny because I had a couple of friends, and even my current sister-in-law called me and said, "What was that disease again? I can't find it on Google." I says, "It's fiction."
But you know, it's so funny because it seems so real to me. And then I do transcendental meditation, and there's a type of brainwave where you're in what's called the unified field, where you actually go down. And I'm like, is this real? Like, could somebody permanently stay there? So I was almost tempted to go on Google. And like,
you were afraid to meditate after that, I know.
Exactly. But yeah, that was interesting. I loved how you brought it. It's like romance. It's a mystery. It's a medical mystery. It's just had so many different characteristics in it, and I thought that was amazing how you were able to bring that all together.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So, Michael, you're going to bring a confession out of me now as a man, because in my life I've read a sum total of 2 romance novels.
That's it?
Okay. Yours was the second one.
Oh, right.
And I read it in a day.
Really? God, well,
the
thank
first
you.
one took me a week. This one I read in a day. Because once I got hooked into the story, I couldn't stop. And it's funny because the place I started reading the book was at a car repair shop. and
that's funny.
You know, it wasn't even like the right setting for it, but that's okay. Listening to all the noise of the, you know, the electric drills and everything and all that stuff, and I'm just reading away, and I got my card done and I went home and I said, you know, I'm not done reading this for today. And then I just kept reading.
I know, I called you. I'm like, Lynn, you finished the book already? That's like a record.
Yeah,
You're like, yeah, I finished it in one day. I'm like, oh my God.
I really enjoyed it because there was what I found was that there was something in it for everyone. And that was really, really good, because if you're human and have a heart, you're going to enjoy this book. I think that includes most people, right? So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And like I said, I don't typically read anything from cover to cover in one day. You
know what I think made it a quick read? The chapters. I've never seen a book where the chapters were so short. And I was like, it gave me the sense of like, oh my God, I'm already on chapter 15, like a sense of accomplishment. Like, it seemed to be going faster. Like, what was the purpose of that? I'm just curious.
The purpose is very simple. I want to keep my readers reading. I want to keep them engaged. The question I have for you is, how many times have you read a book and you wanted to read a little bit more, you were getting ready to go to sleep, and you counted the pages in the next chapter and it was 42?
You're right.
You'll put that book down. You'll say, oh my God, I'm not going to read 42 more pages. You'll put that book down. You will never pick it up again. The book will never get finished.
You're right.
Because you know when you pick it up, if you want to finish the chapter, which most of us do, we usually end, you know, when we're ready to go to sleep or we're ready to finish reading, you usually do it at the end of a chapter. And if you got to read 40 pages in a chapter, you know, you're not going to do it. So the short chapters are there for a reason. And I use them as a bridge, because usually at the end of each chapter, there's a little red herring, which makes you want to read the next chapter.
Oh,
and if you count the pages in the next chapter, they're never going to be more than 7 or 8. Some are as short as 1.
You also broke up the pages, so there was a lot of white space on the pages, so it didn't feel overwhelming.
Right.
Well, not only that,
get buried in it, right?
The print is a little larger. The print is a little larger than 12 point, and the reason for that is smaller print strains the eyes and makes you sleepy. So.
Yeah.
Oh, I like these tips. See,
So
these
that's-
are really good tips for our writers, because we love to interview writers
Yeah.
and people who are in the process of learning, you know, publishing their book. So these are little nuances and tips that are really helpful. And I knew there was a method to, I knew there were certain things that you did for a reason. I just didn't know what the reason was. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, you're very welcome. And
that's-
what you've got to do too, what I like to do, is when you open up a book, when the writer opens the book, as far you know, as chapter 1, page 1, you've got to hit your reader with a bunch of questions that they need answered. You want to make them continue on reading to try to find out what the story is all about and what's going on. If you want, I'll give you a little example.
Please.
For example,
Thank you.
let me read you from chapter 1
Yeah,
under the Divi Tree. Matthew Crane, age 58, handed his first-class boarding pass to the gate agent at JFK Airport. As she scanned the passengers with a wide-open irises, the gate agent took particular notice of his handsome face, brown eyes, abundant salt and pepper hair. Although Matthew enjoyed flying, this time he was overly anxious. He never took this flight alone. He was a child again, waiting in line for his first roller coaster ride. Confusion for Matthew was the operative word for the day. There was a heaviness in his chest. It tortured his breathing. He desperately took a deep breath, trying to sigh and relieve the pressure. It didn't work. As the agent followed along with arrives, he proceeded onto the jetway, boarded the plane, and found his seat in first class. There was already a passenger seated next to the window, in the window seat next to him. Her attention seemed to be focused outside the aircraft. Matthew still felt the anxiety that gripped him. Fastening his seat belt, he felt a slight twinge of pain. Fleetingly but silently he winced. Ouch! It was insufferable. Just annoying as his right hand moved across his abdomen and located the 2x2-inch self-adhesive bandage beneath his shirt. It was located about 3 inches above his navel. As the cabin filled with air, with passengers, the remaining passengers settled in for the flight. A female flight attendant was taking mail orders. She approached a couple seated across from Matthew with a clipboard in hand and said, "Would you like something to eat?" Hearing the passenger answer in a thick French accent, "The salmon for Madame and me, Mademoiselle," Matthew turned to him and said in French, "Bonjour, the salmon est délicieux." The salmon is very good. Turning to Matthew, the Frenchman asked, "Vous êtes français? Are you French?" "No, monsieur, je suis américain." Matthew explained that he's not French, but American. So what have we learned so far from that opening page? We learned two things. One, we've got a protagonist who's getting on a plane. He's middle-aged and he's handsome because the stewardess told us that as he was boarding the plane. Whatever his destination is, it's international because he's on a 757. We know that. He has an injury. We don't know if he's stabbed or he's been shot because he's got apparently a small bandage on his abdomen that's bothering him. Will the female passenger alongside of him be part of his journey? Not so much his flight. He's very anxious and overly anxious, and he's taken his flight alone for the first time, and he speaks French. Now, the reader would read that and say, "Okay, I got to know about this guy." You
Yes.
know? And I've described him. We know he's middle-aged. We know he's he's going somewhere around the world, and we don't know where. And we know it's wintertime because as you read a little further, it says as the plane's taking off, it's cutting through the half-inch snow on the runway. So that is in itself is enough to get the reader to read a little bit more into the next chapter. But the next chapter will give you a couple more
Right.
questions in your mind to make you want to read again and again. So that's what I do.
You built the curiosity because you really built that curiosity because from reading that chapter, I'm like, okay, what happened to this guy? I need to know, where is he going? What, like all these unanswered questions. So your strategy, did you learn that in NYPD? How'd you come up with that strategy?
Well, let me tell you a little secret about detective work and investigations. Okay?
I think you might have
police
learned
officers,
something there.
Police officers, by reputation, are allowed to lie to a suspect to try to get information from
Oh
them.
wow!
It's allowed. You could
Okay.
say, "Hey, Charlie told me you were there." Okay, I was there. You know.
Right.
So, I jokingly tell people that fiction writers are great liars because you're making up stories.
True.
So that's basically it. No, I don't know if I learned it in the NYPD, but it's something that I do.
No, it was a great strategy because it really kept me engaged and wanting to know more, like, who is this guy, you know? So I think it was a good strategy. What are your thoughts, Lynn?
Well, I agree. Every chapter had one new piece, at least one new piece of information that then would take you into the next chapter.
Right.
And because you needed it
bridge.
may have answered questions from the previous chapter, but then it created new ones. And so it was like literally, we always talk about the cosmic breadcrumbs, right?
Yes,
right?
follow the
and
cosmic breadcrumbs.
And you're like following the cosmic breadcrumbs from chapter to chapter, and then somehow the whole day passes and you finish the book. And that was my experience with it, but it was just literally following the breadcrumbs. And oh, I got that question answered, but oh man, now there's a new one.
Yeah.
Now I got to get the answer to that one.
New ones.
And then in the process of getting the answer to that one, how did he do that? He snuck another question in there that I have to get answered, right? And so it just flows that way.
It's a
and
technique I try to use. And I also write in a conversational tone, as though I'm sitting there telling you a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And then the hardest part is, and you do this in rewrites, you've got to suspend disbelief. Now, Hollywood gets away with it. I'll explain that in a minute. Suspending disbelief is very simple. I can't say the snowplows are moving down Glades Road in the middle of August, pushing aside
Right.
a 20-inch snowfall, because it's not going to happen.
Right.
Unless I'm writing science fiction and trying to prove the world's upside down.
Right.
So you've got to suspend disbelief, and you got to do that. You know, in my first novel, I almost blew it. I had 300 people in a dining hall that was only 60 foot square. I said, wait a minute, this isn't going to work, unless there were Lilliputians. But you've got to do that, you know. And a lot of a lot of writers skip through that and they forget it, and it's all in the editing. It really is. It sounds silly, but it's in the editing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I
And the
mean,
most useless word in a novel, in any book, really, is the word that. And I think you would know that as an editor, Lynn. The sort of first thing I do is after I finish a manuscript is I go through and I look and I search for all the that's.
Oh,
And
wow.
sometimes I wind up with 400 or 500 of them in there. Now, you
Yeah.
could say
Wow.
something like, Mary said that going to the circus was fun. Well, if you took the word that out there, it would be Mary said, comma, going to the circus is fun. You don't need that.
Right.
And the other word is likes. If you keep putting likes in there, it's like this, it's like that, it gets monotonous.
Yeah.
So you've got to try to get your descriptions down a little bit better.
we talked about that on a phone call several weeks ago.
We did, yeah.
And I'm editing a book now that is literally filled with that's, except not anymore. Because now it's like you don't notice something until you notice it or until someone calls your attention to it, and then that's all you see. For example, if you've never driven a white car before, you may not notice white cars on the road, but if you buy a white car, suddenly they're everywhere.
It's,
Right?
it's your reticular activating
Yes.
system in your brain, because we have so much that our brain is consuming that if you give it something to do, now it knows. So it's like now it gives it a job to do. So that's how our brains function. But I think we had the similar situation when we were editing our book. Do you remember I kept using the same word twice in the same paragraph, and I'm like, why am I doing that? It's not descriptive enough.
Right.
And now we see that all the time, right? It shows up for us.
Yes, when we see people writing and we notice that they just can't get away from that one word. They love it, or they got a big discount, a volume discount on it at the word store.
Like the same.
Well, there's a whole,
right?
there's a whole problem today. I hate to say this, but there's a problem in school today with English literature and in writing classes. And what it is it's this whole woke society. You know, I hate to bring it up, but it's true. Think about this. I said this to my granddaughter once. I says, what happened to the word much? Why is today everything so fun? You know, I went to the circus, it was so fun. What happened to the verbs and the adverbs? Where are they? When I was in school, we had to write a correct sentence. You had to have a prepositional phrase, you had to have a verb, you had to have a noun, you had to have a pronoun. You had to write a correct sentence. Today, the English teachers turn to it and they say, oh, I know, Mary, it seems wrong, but that's Mary's writing style. We can't insult her. Give me a break. Teach them to write correctly. You know,
Because they write the way they text.
they write the
Oh,
way
yeah,
they
that's-
talk.
then we're in
They
trouble.
write the way they talk. And I'm
Yeah.
ready to pick up a best-selling novel one day and find in there OMGs. You know,
Oh
give
my
me a break. You know,
gosh. I hope
how
not.
about spelling it out? You know,
So have you, I think you've always been a writer, Michael, is that right?
Oh God, no! Let me. You want to hear history?
I do. I really want
I was.
to.
I hated to write. I hated to do homework when I was in school.
Really?
When I was in high school, I hated to read. Honestly, I had a teacher once who asked me who my favorite author was. I said George Washington. She said he never wrote a book. I said that's why he's my favorite author. You know, my best friends were those who borrowed my books and never returned them. You know, so I really, I learned more from doing and acting things out than I actually did from sitting down and writing. So from reading, I just didn't like to read. And it's crazy because when I look back at it, the last thing I ever thought I'd become is a best-selling author, and here I am as a guy who couldn't read.
That's what I'm saying. Something changed in you. I guess, was it, because I know it said you started writing it in 2002, so was it when you retired or something
I retired in 2002, and I was too young. I was 57 years old. There I am in Miami, in Florida, and I'm saying, what am I doing here? After a year of golf and tennis, I sat down. I said, I got to do something. So I wrote a business book I always wanted to write because I was very successful in business. And I had my own style of management. So I wrote this book, and I said, well, what the hell? Nobody wanted to publish it, so I self-published it.
Nice.
And I said, well, I built a business from scratch, which was successful. What's marketing a book? Boy, was I wrong. You know that, Len. So my publishing house for a couple of $1,000s. I said, what's this about? I called them up. They said, you haven't checked Amazon lately? So I said, no. I went on Amazon, I looked at it, and there was a review by Forbes that said this book belongs on the desk of every CEO in America.
Wow.
That not only launched some good feelings in me, but it launched a speaking career. Now I'm doing corporate speaking all over.
Can I ask what book that was?
That was Success by Default, the depersonalization of corporate America. And I should have had an editor, it would have been better. But I basically developed a business theory of disruptive technology in a digital age. There's no people left anymore. There's no personal relationships. People don't know how to do business like we used to do when I was growing up.
Yeah.
You want to negotiate, you do it over lunch. You don't do it through emails because you can't shake hands with an email or a fax. So that took off. And then my second book after that was a political expose on how politics has changed in America. And that book became #6 on the bestseller list, and that launched my whole career on TV. I then became a political analyst.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. And that led to about 300 appearances on TV. And then I said, you know what, I want to write a novel. And my first one was The Conversion Prophecy, which was the Islamic takeover of the world without firing a shot. It was a political thriller similar to the Manchurian Candidate with a secret society and everything else in it. And that took off, and then that won the award. It was a finalist in the Next Generation Independent Awards, and then it won the award for Best New Fiction Writer. And I had two awards from the Johnny Weaver Award, which was a Reader's Choice Award, which is like it's like the Grammy of publishing, which was unbelievable.
Yes,
so that surprised me, and that forced me to write under the Divi Tree. So, and one thing led to another, and here I am. So
that's a great story. How you originally did it for a business. Was it? Can I ask what kind of business you had? That
I was in a security alarm business.
Nice.
It had nothing to do with being a police officer. I was out of work for for almost a year, and it was 1981 during the great sort of semi-depression. We were in a horrible recession, and Carter just got out of the White House, and interest rates were 21%, mortgages 18%. People today would cringe if they saw those numbers. And
so
I
Michael,
decided to go into business.
There are generally two kinds of writers, right? Two styles or two ways that people write. So one of them is where you sit down at an appointed time every day and you just start writing. And the other one is that you write when the moment hits, when the ideas start flowing, you start to write. And it's very important that writers know which one they are, because if they are the second one but they think they're supposed to be the first one, they'll spend a lot of unproductive hours in front of their computer screen building frustration. So if you had to pick between those two styles, which would you say was yours?
Spontaneous. I can sit down for 4 or 5 hours and just write and tear it up.
Yeah.
Good.
Or I can write for an hour and have 30, 40 pages and say, wow. So, you know, it's crazy. And then, you know, then you get writer's block. You know, to me, I describe writer's block as when my characters stop talking to me.
There you
So
go.
people-
I love that.
People have said to me, well, what do you do then? I says, I give them time. They come around.
Yes, I love that.
Or I'll pick up another project. I've written 2 and 3 books at the same time. And people say, how can you do that? I says, well, when you're in school, did you ever write 2 or 3 research papers at the same time?
Right.
You've got different topics. If I run into writer's block on A, I'll move to B. And if that doesn't, if B stumps me, I'll go to C. And if they all stump me, I'll go back to A. But somehow when it all gets done, right. I mean, I'm in the middle now of writing a novel, and something came up in a nonfiction book that my publisher said, you'd be great at this. And next thing you know, here I am. I put the novel on the back burner, and now she wants a manuscript by the end of this month. So I'm sitting home 4, 5, 6 hours a day just going crazy. But it's nonfiction. It makes life easier because it's a lot of cut and paste.
So what's the
Love it.
biggest lesson you've learned about yourself from writing?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that because I want to know. I do.
I've learned to believe in myself a little bit more than I used to, because I've been creative, and creativity doesn't. You don't have to have a paintbrush in your hand with an easel. You know, a typewriter works, or a word processor works. So it's what I've really learned about myself is that I do have the ability to do it. Something that, you know, as I said, the last thing I ever thought I would become is a writer, let alone a best-selling author. So
Wow, I love it.
we've come to the part of the show where we'd like to invite you to share something with us and with the audience in terms of maybe something you have coming up, something you'd like us to be aware of. What would that be for you?
how about a vacation for the first time in 3 years?
Right?
Yeah, you know, I just got so many projects out there that I want to get moving at the same time. Some of them are life projects where we're doing some renovation in a home, so that
Nice.
that keeps you busy,
Yeah.
keeps you thinking. But at the same time, I have a lot of organizations I'm involved with. I'm on the board of directors of the Leadership Business Council, and we've done that.
Nice.
And I do some mentoring at FAU for people in the business plan competition every year. It's like the Shark Tank.
Oh,
And I
nice.
lecture there occasionally, on usually in the MBA program for entrepreneurs, and keeps me busy.
That's exciting.
Well, that's terrific. So in terms of, you mentioned you were working on some new books. Can you give us just a moment of maybe a glimpse into one of them?
Well, I'm working on 2. One I was working on an erotic murder mystery,
Oh my God. I wanna
and
read it.
I found a poison. I won't tell anybody what it is, but I found a poison that's untraceable by autopsy. So it's going to be an unbelievable story. I mean, it's going to go on for a trial and everything else. And somebody's looked at it. A friend of mine read about the first 10 chapters and said, "You can't publish this." They said, "You're going to make 50 Shades look like a comic book." I says, "I'm just descriptive. That's all." And I put that on a back burner because I've taken on a political challenge about climate change. And I'm writing a book now on the pitfalls of not being scientific with climate change, and I'm showing that there really isn't a problem. So I've got a lot of proof that shows that there is no problem. So
I believe the earth has its ability to just heal, like our bodies. We can innately heal ourselves. So that's I choose to believe, right?
well, the earth is a spinning magnum of liquid,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
so we'd like to
Yeah, we're
thank
gonna continue
you
that
for being our
conversation.
guest this week.
thank you for
I hope
having me. I
all of
really
our
appreciate
readers
it.
and writers have picked up on some nuggets because
Yeah.
there's some great stuff here, and we want to invite you to join us again next week when our guest will be children's author Paul Martini.
Yep.
And he will actually have his character
Marla.
Marla
He's
with
bringing
him.
Marla with him next week,
And,
so that'll be exciting.
As we close the show for this week, we
Yep.
would like to wish all of you happy reading, and don't forget to find Under the Divi Tree so you can cool off and enjoy the
Take
dog
some
days
shade.
of summer.
Great book. Thank you so much.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Even if you have never written a book, you are still an author. In fact, we all are. In every moment, each of us is writing our own unique story that we call our lives. Because many of us are, as in the lyrics of the Dan Hill song, Sometimes When We Touch, writers still trapped within our truth. If this is you, why not start writing your thoughts in a journal? It will help you get your truth on paper and could just be the start of your own book. And don't forget to join us here every week for the next edition of The Editor's Desk.